friends, welcome once again to the Weekly High with LSD show. This week, we are delighted to have with us Venkatesh Hariharan, better known as Venki. He's a veteran tech journalist and India representative of the Open Invention Network. His name is pretty synonymous with what we talk about open source in India. And of course, he's been with IDFC as a research guy. He's been with Google and as far as policy is concerned, and many other such roles. And then, of course, welcome once again to Jayant Kola, founder of Deep Tech Research and Advisory firm Convergence Catalyst. So happy to have both of you on the show. And of course, my co-host, L. Subramaniam, better known as Subu. And without much ado, we have plenty of things to discuss as usual, a lot of tech developments during the week. But what I thought of, we could just take about 4 things that we could speak about in this particular session. One, of course, is how the latest spectrum auctions have panned out, how they might affect mobile phone bills and the quality of service more importantly, what does it mean for the 5G kind of environment, which is why we all have with us Jayant, who's a telecom expert. Then, of course, we have a Wall Street Journal report which says that India's government has threatened to jail employees of Facebook, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, because it seeks to squash political protests and sort of gain far-reaching powers over the discourse on foreign-owned tech platforms. Of course, that's a continuation of what has been happening in the past with the whole thing about OTT, the new kind of rules that we have seen, which we discussed in the earlier episodes with cyber law experts also. Napanay was here on the show earlier also. And of course, in this particular context, you had Amazon apologizing over Tandav and saying that the Supreme Court saying that the government needs stronger rules to protest. So the Supreme Court sort of said that this does not hold water. I can see the smile on Suku's face on that, but he'll have much to say about it. And then, of course, you have the whole digital payment space, which is growing exponentially. And we are seeing that RBI wants to come up with NUEs, basically. So what does it mean for another entity for retail payments? What does it mean for us? And then, of course, we should not be forgetting, it's International Women's Day. And I know there are no women on this particular panel, so it's a little stray, it's like a kind of ironical that we don't have women here. We should have had women. But just for our viewers, the editor of CXO Today, which is our enterprise tech flagship, the editor is basically a woman, Sohini Bagchi. So yes, we in our own small way, we do try to have women.
She is pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. She is. She's listening very intently to what we are saying. So, I mean, we could start with any topic, any choice of yours. I have given you all 4 topics to choose from. Since we're all veteran tech observers, why don't you all start the ball? Because typically I do it.
CBDCs, the big one, the big elephant in the room.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then that's Venki would love to start on it.
So, on the new umbrella entity, with your permission, I'll quickly kind of
please explain it to the viewers what it means.
So, I think last year RBI came up with a notification saying that they want to bring in new umbrella entities, and this is basically for running the payment backbone of India. Now, you already have one entity, which is the National Payment Corporation of India, and just a clarification, it's not just for retail payments, it's actually for interbank settlements, running ATM networks, etc., and to interoperate with the unified payment interface. So what has been astonishing to me about this particular notification is that it changes the structure of the payment industry in a very fundamental way. And in India, if you think about it, with India Stack, the idea is that identity, payments, and data will be structured as utilities, which can then be harnessed by multiple for-profit entities. And the logic has been that these should be public digital infrastructure, which can be leveraged by other organizations and built on top of. So that could be non-profits, that could be for-profits. So NPCI was deliberately, designed as a non-profit that would offer payment as a service on a utility pricing model. Now, and then, if you also step back in time and look at the Wattal Committee report, which was looking at deepening payments in India, there are 73 recommendations in that report. None of them say that, NPCI should be, there should be competition introduced for NPCI. Now, in principle, bringing in competition for NPCI is not a bad idea. But how you do it is really, really important, because what has been built up over the last 10 years or a decade is a very careful institution, which is, non-profit in nature, which provides payments as a utility and allows other people to build on top of it. Now, if you bring in for-profit entities to compete with a non-profit, what is the dynamic of it? There are 2-3 implications of this. One is that payments is the lifeblood of an economy. Now, it would be amazing to think that the US would allow, say, a Tata Group or somebody to be, running the payment backbone of America. Now, here in India, we are talking of, turning the entire structure from a non-profit structure to a for-profit, bringing in competition for NPCI, which is for-profits, and not just for-profits, but MNCs. You have Amazon and other companies looking at building these infrastructure. So I think it's a very the profound challenges. I think my fear is that this could actually set back our ecosystem by at least a decade, because one, so far we've had an Indian entity controlling the backbone of the payment ecosystem in India, and globally, if you look at it, every policymaker is thinking of how do you ring fence, how do you kind of push back against the kind of challenges that we are seeing with monopolies, with the network effects. Here in India, because we had NPCI as a non-profit, the network effect basically resided within NPCI, and you could build UPI as a platform where you have almost 200 players who can interoperate with each other. And typically, look at it, globally payments has been a duopoly. In China, it has been WeChat and Alibaba and MasterCard and Visa in the US. I think there is enormous social value in ensuring that payments, the backbone of payments, is built and run as a non-profit. So, because that allows you to do a lot of policy initiatives like, enabling financial inclusion, etc., etc. I think we are also entering an era where you cannot govern society by law alone. You have to have the technology code, etc., to also, have a fine-grained control of the ecosystem. And I think a lot of these.
I'd like to interject over here, because you mentioned something about competition. Now, clearly, I mean, the whole argument overall that we are having over here is that competition, you can't have a monopolistic organization, etc., which actually even I find a little strange, because UPI is a backbone, as you said. And it has allowed for a lot of seamless kind of digital payments out here. We are seeing, I mean, the numbers tell the story, basically, the kind of success that we have seen with UPI. And of course, a lot of players out here using that particular backbone. But something similar, is it that the government is trying something similar what it tried in banking, where it had RBI as a bank, lots of banks over there, then it had new bank licensees, etc. Is that the kind of model that these guys are trying to, saying that it was successful there, we got those private kind of guys, we allowed private companies to become banks, get banking licenses?
So, so what is intriguing about this move is, a few things. One is that if you look at the Wattal Committee report, again, that is a very high-level committee, and there's no mention of doing something like this to kind of, let's say, deepen digital payments. So nobody is very sure of why the government has, or the RBI has brought this kind of a move in, and what are the motivations for that. So the new umbrella entity notification is just a 4-page notification which says that RBI is inviting organizations to bid. They have to have a minimum 500 crore net worth, etc., etc.
And this is by 31 March.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it was February 2020.
They extended it. I think they
Extended.
And the final
Yeah.
deadline for submitting responses is end of this month. So this is just a 4-page document, and if you look at payment banks, etc., there were white papers, there was explanation of why you're bringing in payment banks, etc. And here you have no such explanation, and so basically what is happening is the structure of the ecosystem of the payment backbone is being fundamentally altered without any discussion on what is the goalpost, what are the objectives, how is the process going to unfold? How is...
But Venki, I have a question. I have a series of questions for you. See, you mentioned non-profit 6 times. Okay.
Yeah.
I was counting. Now the point is that, see, and then you also mentioned that you asked the question: would US allow Indian entities to do the same in the US? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, see, as far as the Indian entities being allowed in the US is concerned, it is, I mean, today you have Indian publications, for example, Indian newspapers, Indian media can't hold equity in the US. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a WTO issue, and that's a bilateral issue which will get resolved or not resolved. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
not going there. But on the profit making or a non-profit making part of it, you mentioned a very interesting thing. You said it's a social issue rather than merely something that can be driven by law. Now, if you were to look at that, today your unbanked India is almost 8/10 of banked India.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
to assume that one single entity will ever be able to cover even a significant part of the unbanked India is not going to happen, both in retail and in wholesale. Okay.
Yeah.
Second point is that profit making is a rather, unlike the old Hindi films, it is not a bad idea. Okay, it's a good idea because profit making allows efficiency. Now, I'm not being, I don't want to be anecdotal, but the fact is that you already are seeing the cracks, in the superstructure, that the NPCI superstructure, right? So, what is so wrong with allowing for-profit entities to come in and expand the base, drive more efficiencies into the system, okay, and therefore, cover a whole lot larger number of people than what is being covered today?
Jayant also can step in. Jayant,
Yeah,
you have
Venki,
been
can I
tracking
step in?
it.
Can I step in here? Yeah.
No, this is a free forum. Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
and I think
So-
basically because all of us have been pointing out time and again, I think Venki disappeared.
So, Subbu, I agree with you as in terms of, what the market is big enough. 8/10 of India is unbanked. Okay. Why can't a few for-profit or corporations who are known for their agility, speed, and, efficiency come in and, expedite the process? I mean, we've seen that in telecom, right? I mean, before the mobile, wave, 32 million, landlines were given, and all of us were waiting for 2-3 years to get a,
Exactly.
landline connection, right? And look what mobile revolution has done. In 10 years, it connected 1 billion Indians. So yes, I agree that the private industry, the private sector, and the corporates can do it. But to emphasize on what Venki was saying earlier, here in this case, it's a combination of payments, data, and identity. Okay, this combination is extremely strong and powerful. Okay, so a non-profit or an organization with no profitability agenda, if it runs a fundamental architecture and the policy making, like how NPCI is running UPI, okay, then enabling for-profit companies to use that basic fundamental platform and architecture, that's a great framework, okay. But if you allow, I mean, this is my personal opinion again, if you allow for-profit companies to come in and lay down the fundamental platform and, architecture itself, look at, how the entire world is now, working against the big tech, right? All of a sudden, earlier these technology companies used to work with the individual sovereign governments to get licenses to operate in their marketplaces. Now, literally before anyone can realize, the equation has flipped where the countries are getting together and forming consortiums to break up the big tech. Okay, look at what Facebook has done in Australia with the media industry. Okay, and now all of a sudden the big tech companies, are bigger than the countries, the biggest economies in the world. Okay,
Then, what we are saying, what you're also admitting as a corollary is that, as a society, whether it's India or US or anywhere else in the world, the law is just not being able to catch up with technology.
Definitely. That's
Because for me, if that is a concern, the localization of data is a concern, the fungibility of data is a concern, the monetization of data is a concern, then I would put laws in place. And I would say, you jolly well, the fundamental issue that I have, is that that's why I like what I wanted to take a thread from what Venki said, that we have this huge, romantic thought about why non-profit is good. More importantly, decades of Hindi films have driven into us that a guy who makes profit is a crook.
Actually,
I'm saying,
Venki has lost his connection, so he's
I
not
know.
going to join us back. Now the problem is we are saying things because the guy comes with an open source background.
I know.
Yeah, so it's a little fair. Let's wait for.
No, I don't worry. I am capable of repeating myself. But the fact is that this. See, if you look at NUEs, okay, who are the guys who are getting in? SBI is getting in. Now, SBI's network is enormously large.
Correct.
Okay. Now, if you look at the retail companies, tomorrow I'd like to see an ITC getting in. Okay. I would like to see an RIL. Obviously, RIL will get in. I mean, if you breathe, then RIL will be there. So that's okay. I mean, okay, we live with that. Okay. Reliance will come in. Okay. Now, the fact is that more number of people always means competition.
Yes.
Therefore, ergo, it means efficiency. Right?
Yes.
You have an opportunity to shift from one platform to another. Like yesterday, for example, I was driving back and I was trying to make a payment through my Beam. And, I made payment twice because the damn thing got stuck. Okay, so then the guy said, no, sir, but how can I accept it? It's processing. So I had to make the payment again. Okay, now you already are seeing cracks. And the enormity of the number of people that is unbanked.
No, but if
you got a billion people.
But wait, Subbu, if you're talking about cracks, do you mean that, okay, just because of, like if you're creating an infrastructure highway, for instance,
Correct.
have NHAI that runs about whatever 10,000 kilometer plus kind of stuff to other roads,
Right.
and has built the golden quadrilateral.
Quadrilateral.
Yeah. Now you're saying that you're creating another infrastructure player because we are talking for backbone. So now you're going to have simultaneously two
Absolutely.
backbones. You're saying, okay, fine,
Absolutely.
go on this infrastructure, go on that one. It's not about going on this highway or that highway.
No. So I'll take your own example back. If you look at the Pune-Mumbai Expressway, okay, you had it in a national highway already there. Then ILFS came and built the Pune-Mumbai Expressway. 3 years later, 5 years later, the government of India, did the highway one better. And now people have a choice whether to go on the expressway or to go on the other thing, and both are equally good.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at golden quadrilateral, you have options today. Okay. My point is that my limited point, Venki, you're just back. So, we lost you in the way.
We were asking whether we require two infrastructure highways. So
Or multiple.
Basically, multiple infrastructure backbones. Yeah.
Because my argument, Venki, is that choice improves efficiency, and making profit is not necessarily a bad word. And the other point that I made when you were not there was that we are purpose admitting that the law, whether it's in India or in the US, is helpless against tech. Law is not caught up with tech.
Yeah.
That is not.
I won't say helpless. It always lags tech.
It always.
Tech innovation.
That's a fact of life. It will be.
In which case, teeth your law. Make your law stronger, but do not.
No, so I don't think that argument anybody is going to buy, because tech will always remain a step ahead of.
Fine.
You'll devise policies after the technology comes.
Yeah, but then look at the US. After all this, they are still not thinking of scrapping 230.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm saying that you have a set of people, a billion people in India who are unbanked.
Right.
One element of infrastructure, no matter how big you make it, okay, will always be suboptimal.
Yeah.
So why not have multiple people? And now if your problem is, like I said to Jayant, was fungibility of data, localization of data, monetization of data, misuse of data.
Misuse of data.
Right? Okay, these are
Yeah,
four
this
things.
is
Okay, in which case create laws, create rules, create enforcement. I mean, more than laws, I think our problem is enforcement. Okay,
Yeah.
enforce it.
and
Okay,
also
but do not
will it
deprive the people of choice.
but will it increase costs? Venki, Subbu,
Yes, it will. It will.
Jan?
Let
See,
It
let
will.
people learn to pay for it.
Yeah, it's a
Subbu, so
we're creating a for-profit private sector. I mean, they'll have their infrastructure costs, they'll have they'll have their profitability.
But
It's
then
still going to
they should
that will
give
be
them the
passed on.
option of getting onto a lower cost of thing, because that I'm just saying that if you're creating those
Yes,
two infrastructure, the tolls could be higher on one highway, the tolls could be lower on one highway.
they will be
I don't
So
naturally. If I want to,
My pushback on that is going to be this, that the infrastructure layer, in my opinion, should be a non-profit layer. The what you build on top of it, it should be for profit. The reason for the infrastructure being non-profit is because that enables utility pricing, that enables, so if there is a competition that is to be brought in for NPCI, that should be non-profit. That should be another non-profit. Let the Reliance and others and other players play at the layer above the infrastructure layer, and think of it in multiple ways. The best case scenario is that the competition for NPCI expands the market, and which is a great goal. I think I would be very happy to see that. The worst case scenario is that we will have enormous amount of competition. We will have enormous pricing issues at the infrastructure layer, and eventually we may have a utility like NPCI being pushed out of the market, and we've seen that happen with BSNL, etc.,
Yes.
etc. So I think that's the worst case scenario.
Venki, BSNL got pushed out because of efficiency for service.
And see.
BSNL, even today, if you look at BSNL, okay, I mean, I was shocked to see a BSNL statement saying that we are going to extend our 3G coverage pan India. Bloody hell, you're talking about 3G coverage pan India in 21. Okay, now
Subbu,
BSNL's problem is efficiency.
People
Subbu,
require
it's not
voice.
just efficiency; it's regulatory capture also.
Yeah, it's a,
So
I agree.
Regulatory
and
capital.
I think we are seeing the same dynamics play out again in this particular space. To be very polite, that's the
Venki,
dynamics that.
I think this is an argument that we can have ad nauseum, but the fact is that your structure of public sector entities, your command and controls that exist in the public sector, infrastructure, whether it is a ministry and the bureaucrat, okay, you are talking about people, however bright the bureaucrat is, you're talking
Yeah.
about a generalist dictating to a professionalist.
Absolutely.
It never works, right? If
Absolutely.
BSNL, for example, had to be brought back, I think there are ways and means of doing that. There are smart professionals who are willing to do it. Look at the example of India Post Payments Bank.
Yeah.
They got in a very smart professional to run,
Yeah.
and he quit in 2 years. Okay, I think the problem with your public sector non-profit, the problem that I have,
Yeah.
okay, is lack of accountability,
Yeah.
lack of any sort of oversight, professional oversight, okay, which then gets whitewashed into this justification of saying that, oh, but they are non-profit. No, you are non-profit, but you're jolly well supposed to work in a particular way.
yeah,
I would argue.
Are we saying the same thing about NPCI? Because the UPI backbone is pretty efficient from that point of view. I mean, there
Yeah.
are clearly enough.
For the moment, yes, I'm not questioning it.
So you're
I'm
saying it
saying
will
now
probably
scale. When you scale, then
yeah,
what
yeah.
happens?
But I thought it would
Okay.
scale to quite a bit.
Guys, I have a view here and a parallel to draw from the telecom and the mobile industry. And as I'm sitting here and listening to both Subbu and Venki, I think the bottom line is my view is actually neutral and 50-50. There are actually strong points in both the arguments. Okay. And if I have to draw the telecom parallel back in the day, I mean, instinctively, personally, I think I agree with Venki saying that the infrastructure layer needs to be, of a single entity that is more controlled, regulated by the government. But what happened in telecom, right? Early 2000s, when the mobile industry took off also, the optical fiber, the backbone, the NLD was still that of BSNL and MTNL. Okay, even the Bhartis and Tatas and Reliance Communication back in the day and Idea Vodafone used to, take the lease the intercity backbone from BSNL only availability, until Reliance Communication came and put in a parallel optic fiber all across the country. Okay, and then fast forward 20 years, Reliance Jio took about 6 years in the project phase after getting the 4G spectrum to put in, to connect the country at the infrastructure layer with the backbone, right? And what did they do later? They launched the apps, let me call them services, or the app layer. The app layer at an extremely low cost, thereby driving away the existing players who had invested 15-20 years of their business into in the country. That is fine. Okay, they're able to do this because they own the infrastructure. And Subbu, mind you, the telecom and the digital and the extended digital industry has not yet been played out. So the pro is, I agree with you, efficiency, expedited this one. If you would have been dependent on BSNL's NLD network all across the country, I don't think a billion of Indians would have been connected with a 4G network. Okay, definitely not. The parallel backbone of both Bharti and Reliance Jio enable do that. But the con of that is, and which you mentioned, we breathe, Rel will be there. Okay, Reliance will be there. I mean, now Reliance is getting to this one of, through telecom into our digital lives, our entire digital lives, be it retail,
absolutely.
be it utilities, be it everything. And that hasn't been played out, and we don't know. Now here, coming to Venki's point, we don't know what the worst case scenario is, because that still hasn't been played out. And, forward looking back, can we make that adjustment in the payment sector, learning from the telecom sector? Probably, owning one single entity, owning the infrastructure layer, and letting the services players be multiple services players at a for profit. This one, I think
for now, let us now, sort of end the conversation on the NUEs versus RBI, because I think we have spoken at length. And I think what you have done, Jayant, is exactly what I wanted to do, is segue into the telecom sector, because it is bound to be, that parallels cannot be ignored. But speaking about
but Leslie, we should have a longer discussion on this NUE, because this, like Jayant, kind of summarized, it can draw lessons from a lot of industries. At the same time, there is a larger discussion, not just a telecom or not just a payment discussion, but a larger discussion which affects the digital life itself.
So I think
many more
I'm going to
stakeholders
jump in
also.
for a second here. I think Jayant pointed out a issue, which is, the concentration of digital power, and what is the, so there are, I think that's, many regulators are now looking to see how they can minimize. And here, I think in India, we are going the opposite direction, enabling the concentration of digital power. And the point you mentioned about regulatory capacity, Subbu, is, I think, extremely, extremely important. I think we are now in an era where generalists themselves, cannot govern. I mean, between the four of us, we probably have more than 100 years of experience in technology.
Exactly.
And, we ourselves find it so hard to understand the dynamics of what is happening. So generalists cannot, govern technology. We need a new cadre of specialist policymakers, new cadre of regulators.
And I agree with you, Subbu. For 1.25 billion population, we need for-profit companies driving this one. If we were a small European country with less than 20 million, this one, I think, Denmark or something, then the government can take over and run everything. But for us...
I guess I think there are arguments both this way and that way. As I said, we have to see how it pans out. But yes, as of now, the fact remains that the RBI has introduced this. There is going to be a lot of public debate, but knowing the way India operates, we are going to have NUEs. So that's going to be the new reality. Now we'll have to come to terms with that and figure out whether it's going to pan out the way the new banking licenses and RBI, banks worked out with the new banking licenses, or how we'll see. But as we said, I think I agree with Subbu that we'll have a larger debate on this. But for now, as we have already segued into the telecom part of it, I mean, the spectrum results are out. I can see Jan smiling out there. It has fetched the exchequer, what, 77,800 crore.
But yeah, close to 38,000.
And I think 28,000 crore has to be paid upfront, which means again the debt will increase to another, I think, what is it, 7 lakh crore or something?
5 lakh crores.
5 lakh crore.
$67 billion, yeah.
Correct. And I think here clearly acquiring spectrum, I think RGO has acquired more than 57,000 crore. I mean, Bharti is way behind by, I think, something like 19,000 crore.
19,000.
Yeah. And Vodafone Idea is just 2,000 crore.
1/10.
Sorry, who did you say the last was?
Vodafone Idea.
Vodafone Idea.
Good one.
Oh.
Good one.
Okay. So,
well, I typically say that Vodafone has no idea what's happening the other way around. But yes, those are jokes apart. I have a Vodafone connection. Okay, so we are
change immediately.
No, it's working for me for about 20 years, and you'll be surprised. I mean, in all fairness, so this is exactly what I wanted to begin with you, Jen. I know that Techie also has tracked the telecom. All of us have tracked the telecom and then moved to IT and back and forth and all that kind of stuff. Today, like convergence is happening, everything is happening out here. But if you were to just connect the dots and clearly tell us, okay, I'm not going to get into the debt issue because that is it's beyond the scope of what we are going to discuss out here. I want to understand, what does it mean? Additional spectrum, call dropping, quality of service. What does it mean for the common man? What does it mean for enterprises, especially with 5G, IoT and all around? Can you just connect the dots for us first?
I think it's more of honestly, bottom line is I think it's more of an enterprise play. Players retaining their spectrum more than anything else. They're just paying money to the exchequer to retain the spectrum. Does it mean better quality, to the end consumer? Technically, yes, but is that among the top 3 priorities of the players who paid money for the spectrum? I don't think so, honestly. Okay, they'll eventually get there. See, I mean, Reliance bought its 4G spectrum in 2010 and launched its services 6.5 years later in 2016, and their spectrum validity was coming up to this one, and that's why they were very keen on getting this spectrum auction, and they bought the highest chunk any which way. Okay. But if you top down and bottom up, right? Top down for an exchequer, this has been a big disappointment. They were expecting close to 4 lakh crores. What is it, about $50 billion, more than $55 billion of revenue from spectrum auction. They got only 19% of it. Okay, of all the spectrum that's been auctioned, only 37% has been bought. Okay, and that's been bought in more or less the existing bands and not the new bands, be it the 700 or the 2500 megahertz.
Yeah. 700 is gone unsold.
Exactly. So explain to our viewers, Jayant, what does that mean actually? Why is there no interest in that? Because there was a lot of talk about, bidding for the 700 megahertz, especially 900. I'm just forgetting out here, but at least 700
and 2100.
Yeah, 2100.
Also, isn't that estimate very over optimistic given the state of the telecom industry in India?
It is. I mean, but then, government will do its calculation the way they'll do its calculation, right? I mean, 1.72 lakh crores. We love that number, don't we all?
Venki, you're the rhetorical question. I mean, it was always over optimistic. Yeah. Okay, so again, going back, it is somebody who just stretched the spreadsheet formula and said, okay, this is the number. They didn't look at the industry. They didn't look at the consumer. They didn't look at anything else.
They didn't look at the capability. I mean,
what are 700? I just want you to explain the 700 one.
I'll explain you. So science-wise speaking and technically speaking, the lower the spectrum band, okay, the better propagation of the waves and hence the lesser number of cell towers that are required by the cellular operator to put in. Okay, that means anyone who provides services in 700, 800, 900 megahertz, which are in the cellular wave spectrum called lower bands, those operators will have to install lesser number of cell towers to provide the same quality of services. That means lower capex, and by extension, those spectrum bands are costlier, okay, because they provide a better efficiency, scientifically speaking, okay, and hence 700 now cellular technologies operate in various bands, right, from 450 megahertz going all the way up to 3.5 gigahertz, right? And 2G and 3G services operate in 4 or 8 of them. Come 4G onwards, 4G alone operates across 43 different bands, okay, between 450 and 3.5 megahertz, and so does 5G, okay. So typically, ideally speaking, operators would love to own lower band spectrum, okay, to operate, to offer better quality of services, better voice and data services with lesser number of towers, and each tower will also have higher capacity to handle more number of users at the same time, the lower the spectrum band, okay. So in India, what happened is, up until this point, 700 megahertz band was with defense and ONGC and a few other government agencies, which have been using it for their private communication, which have not been available for the telecom mobile industry, to be operated. Over the last few years, the government ensured that the other government agencies vacate the spectrum and make it available. Okay. And from a government point of view, the 700 megahertz spectrum was supposed to bring in the auction of that was supposed to bring in the more revenue. Okay. But the operators did not even touch it because the base price of that itself was so high, and their P&L, their debts are so high. I mean, for example, Reliance Jio is on a $8.5 billion spectrum debt. Airtel is close to 8 billion, and Vodafone Idea is a $13 billion spectrum. This one, I mean, if you just add the spectrum debt of telecom,
wrapping a head around those numbers itself is like.
Let me just give you one data point. The spectrum debt of the Indian telecom industry as a percentage of total debt is over 16, another 13, about 40%. 40% of the total debt, right? So that's what it means, and that's why the operators did not touch the 700 megahertz band, because they can't incur any more losses. Okay, although that is more conducive for the up and coming 5G technology.
With so much debt, would it have made any difference that it taken more
exactly debt? I don't think the telecom operators are bidding at all. I think the bankers are bidding.
Bankers are bidding.
The bankers are saying that nothing, don't touch it. Because see, I mean, at the end of the day, $32 billion debt, okay? Leave Geo out of it, okay? I mean, Geo will be able to manage. I'm sure, Zuckerberg and other people will fund it, okay? But look at $13 billion debt of Vodafone. I mean, that is what I think is it's really worrying all the bankers in India.
Yeah. So
okay?
The way bankers look at it is, the way bankers look at it is, will the spectrum debt be able to be paid by the spectrum validity time period, which now is 10 years. Earlier it used to be 20 years.
20 years,
okay,
yeah.
which now is 10 years. So whatever money is being spent for buying the spectrum in the auction, will that spectrum cost itself will be paid out during the spectrum validity period of 10 years or not? Let alone the capex and the opex and the operational costs. Okay, the moment that crosses, I think the bankers will say, okay, we're not bidding. I think we are already at that stage in the Indian telecom industry.
See, that's going back to the earlier argument that we were having. This is a very classic case of a race which had multiple horses. Now it is reduced to a duopoly. Okay, you now have only 2 players who are going to be playing this market, and it will be in the interest of player number 1 to keep player number 2 active.
Yes, absolutely.
But Subbu and Jayant and Venki, and isn't this the case throughout the world? I mean, you actually have not duopolies. I'm not talking about duopolies. You just have about 2 or 3 players typically who are the most important around the world.
China, 3 players. 3 are becoming 2 in China.
You look at China, you look at US, you look at Canada, you look at all the major countries.
The difference there is that if you look at the United States, for example, okay, you have about 3 or 4 players out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Buying spectrum
and a lot of regional players.
Yeah, right. No, I'm leave the regional players out. I'm talking about the national players, right? Yeah. The AT&Ts of the world, right? You have about 3 or 4 players, and I agree with you. It is always going to be a limited number of players.
Always.
The problem here is not that. The problem here is you have limited number of players in enormous amount of financial stress.
Sure.
And when the government talks about NPAs, when they talk about the stress in the banking sector and all that, I mean, if they look at the sheer spectrum debt that Jayant was alluding to, Okay, this should be a warning sign. I mean, for them, everything else is so. When they start pricing the spectrum, I don't know on what basis. On one hand, you reduce the spectrum validity, you halve it, okay, and then you double the auction price. So how do you expect the industry, which is
And mind you,
already
Leslie,
under
we are the
Yeah, Jayant.
stress. We are the lowest ARPU market in the world.
the world,
I mean,
in the
our
world?
Yeah.
ARPU of $2.2 in the world, in the world,
And
hasn't improved in the last 20 years. Yeah, in the last
that
15 years.
$2.2 also what you're talking about is more for 4G, I think. So for 2G and 3G, it will be much lower, I guess.
Let's take an industry average. Let's take a blended
Yeah.
industry average of $2 to
Yeah,
$2.2.
blended with
My
that.
point is that hasn't improved. Blended. That hasn't
Exactly.
improved in the last 15 years.
So
15
What
years.
has improved are
and
the costs
so
across
how-
the generation of technologies.
so for 4G spectrum users, I mean, for the 4G users would be around what, 50-55% of the entire population today?
Now, yes.
Because we have
Now, yes.
2G and 3G still in
No, but
many
I
areas.
mean,
Yeah,
will
yeah,
it
we
be
have
as high
2G.
as 50%, Jayan? Because I mean, see, 4G predominantly would
Let's
be
take Reliance
in.
Jio. Let's take Reliance Jio. All of 400 million, all of them are on 4G.
The Reliance Jio is completely 4G.
Yeah, all of them are on 4G. And give another 100 mil between Voda
Okay.
and Airtel. So about
So it's
50,
around
55%.
55%.
See, the problem here is that you have multiple factors playing. On one hand, you have this unreasonably high spectrum prices. Okay. On the other hand, you have somebody sitting there and saying that, okay, this is going to be your pricing. Now, that doesn't happen. When you've lived in Canada, you've lived in the United States, right? You know that there the pricing is vastly different.
Yes.
Oh, it's very high.
Okay.
$100.
Right. So, and which is where it is a double whammy. Now, again, I go back to the same argument, it's a pet argument of mine and I can't get it out of my head, is that you cannot have a socialistic governance sitting on a capitalistic market. And that is my problem. You can't have a Prai and a Babu sitting there and saying, okay, you cannot charge more. And then you have the same Babu saying that you got to pay twice as high. Okay, this is going to break the backbone of the industry. And now, on top of that, you have one-legged horse like BSNL. Okay, now where do you go from here?
Yeah.
And what happened, Jayant, now? Basically, like at some point in time, 2G, 3G guys will have to migrate to 4G. How will the pricing work out? How will the affordability, like today, like you get it for about $50, a guy can still do with voice and all. How will it?
I think the forbearance or the market dynamics have been played out to an extent where now we are going to be seeing the reversal of tariffs. I think now the tariff increase will happen. The two leaders have been clearly marked out. The third player is a distant third player and also catering to a non-high ARPU segment. Okay, so the two key players, they will be setting the pricing and the tariffs. Okay, I think the bottoming out of pricing and revenue and ARPUs is already behind us. So
Jayant, are you saying that try as you might, the prices will go up?
I would imagine, yes. I mean, the prices will go up. And second thing, Leslie, is that, I mean, if you have to look at it, both these players are also playing a digital ecosystem play. I mean, Reliance Jio doesn't call itself a telecom company at all. It calls itself a digital company. And, Reliance at least has bigger ambitions and dreams. And there are multiple revenue streams. I mean, to Venki's point earlier, when you overlay data and identity as
But even Bharti, the same applies to Bharti for that matter.
The revenue models and the opportunity.
To some extent.
It does, but it depends on execution. I mean, in the startup world, we always said you bet on an executable horse. Yeah.
True.
So,
No,
I mean, Bharti had an opportunity for 10 years before Reliance even came into the world.
Yeah. I mean, they were the forerunners. I remember DTH was introduced by Bharti, not by Jio. So, I obviously we all know the history of the.
In telecom and mobile, we had VAS, right? I mean, today's digital ecosystem is nothing but the VAS of 15 years ago. I mean, value-added services. Why didn't that evolve
value-added
into
services?
Yeah,
it's coming down.
why do the internet companies need to pave the way, and why couldn't
Oh,
telecom companies do that?
and I think all of us would clearly remember the kind of furrow that we had over VoIP. I mean, the amount of voice over internet protocol, that it is a circuit switch
Exactly.
network, so it cannot connect to a PSTN. Oh my God,
Exactly.
the amount of debates that we had, and nobody talks about it today.
So if I can give you a little anecdote that we have in the telecom industry, we say that telecom industry suffers from a 4-4-4 rule or a paradigm. Any up and coming cutting edge technology is available for telecom industry 4 years before it goes mainstream. Okay. By the time telecom industry gets its heads around and decides to implement it, the telecom industry takes 4 years to decide whether it will implement the cutting edge technology. By the time it's implemented and becomes mainstream in the telecom industry, the cutting edge technology is 4 years behind its peak. Okay, by the time the telecom industry implements it. So we say that, the 4-4-4 rule. We suffer with that.
Good. So I think the common thread between both the discussions we had on the digital payment space and the telecom sector is, in one, we are trying to, some of us at least are trying to dissuade the, a kind of a duopoly in the infrastructure space. Here we are saying, okay, let's encourage more competition. It's a little quite odd, but I guess we'll find a wire media at some point in time. But I want to, in the interest of time, I'd like to segue into the third topic, which is equally important, or rather very important from a gender inclusion point of view, and which is what we keep on talking about, women in tech. Now, it's International Women's Day. We can just talk about the tech part of it. The editor of CXO, who I said, Suhaini Bakchi, she wrote a nice piece on CXO today, basically, again, pointing out the same thing that, all the tech companies barely make up for a third of their workforce. I mean, women typically make up for the third of the workforce, and says the divide even become more prevalent at the top, where men are 30% more likely to be hired for managerial roles rather than women. And in fact, only 23% of C-suite positions are held by women, and women of color receive less recognition.
Even worse,
And I think this is, she quoted the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2020. I mean, clearly, women in tech has been a long-standing issue that we have had out here. Women on boards, we don't see women on boards. And technology, I think, I remember some of the arguments that I won't mention the CEOs that I think, but when we used to have these informal conversations, women are not into technical things, which is so untrue. Today, you find so many women. As I said, the editor of CXO today itself is a woman here within our group. Venki knows so many other people. Jayant knows so many. You know so many other people. So, what is your sense? Why is this not really happening? I mean, other than the kind of mindsets that we have.
So if you remove the mindset, then it will happen. Our problem is a mindset. That's all. I mean, it's as simple as that. We are all smart people. I mean, see, for us, we have, and I'm not just talking about India. Okay, I'm talking about globally. There are degrees of differences, but by and large, it's pretty same. Our problem is that we have always had this historical slotting. Okay, the homemaker versus the hunter-gatherer. Okay, the hunter-gatherer, and a hunter-gatherer was always given a preeminent position.
Yeah,
because he was hunter-gatherer. All right. Now that mindset, and that is thousands of years of mindset, it's seeped into our DNA. Therefore, it becomes very difficult for us to accept. So when you have lame argument that women can't do coding, women can't play football, women can't can't architect networks. I mean, these are all stops that we internally know are nonsense. But we say that only to justify the present.
right.
Okay, we have to justify the present because we created the present. Okay, now if you look at a farcical argument, and I'm just linking the overall national mindset or thought process. There was a point in time when there was a debate about reservation for women in parliament. Okay, and there's a bill still pending which has not been allowed to be tabled, and many parties opposed the bill. There was a very well-known politician gentleman who said, okay, let's start at 10%. My question was, if your women population of India is 49.6%, why would you start at 10%? And secondly, who the hell are you to decide what we're going to start at?
Exactly.
So the debate never went beyond that.
Yeah.
The debate was 10%, and somebody said no, it should be 20%. They said okay, let's close the whole debate. I think we should have started at 50%, and then argued back.
Yeah.
It is. If you remove the mindset, Leslie, there is no argument. We know it's nonsense. It is just that we perpetuate the normal because we are scared of the new normal.
I'm just asking a question. I believe in women in tech, so absolutely we require women in tech.
I mean,
Yeah.
they
And
are
in fact,
equally smart. They're
uh,
equally
Yeah.
smart.
And if you look at the
Sohini, you're on
university
the
numbers, yes, we want Sohini.
Sohini, you're on the conversation. Why don't you just come live? You have been listening to us. Would you like to come live? It will be nice to have a woman also. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we would love to have your thoughts on this because you have been listening intently to the entire debate. So it should be interesting as to this kind of men all around. We'd love to have a lady.
First of all, it's been a fascinating conversation throughout, which I was a mute spectator. It was wonderful. Coming to this topic in particular, I would not like to say my opinion alone, but I've been speaking to a lot of women in IT who are women leaders. And at this point of time, of course, we all know that, women can do everything and, they are extremely empowered. And women in IT, they're all coming up big time. What they have emphasized, and I agree, is that mentoring is a point. What they're trying to say is, women do not network as much as men. There can be multiple reasons for that. And if they network and they find better mentors, both men and women, then obviously, the conversation will be different going forward. More mentors, those women can also mentor the other women, and also men can pitch in, having men on board, and their pitching in and their way of thinking, in the sense that their contribution, their helping support, as well as women, mentoring has to be extremely gender neutral. I
Right.
consider Subbu and Leslie as my mentor,
Yeah.
and that helps. So
I think you
I
brought up
would,
a
And I
very
think
very
it's a
important
good,
point. Very
yeah,
very
I think
important
it's a
point on
good starting
networking.
step. Yeah.
Yeah. But this
And
networking.
sorry, go
Sorry.
on, Leslie.
No, I
Go
thought
on.
because she just highlighted a very important point saying that women don't network because of certain hurdles and all that thing. I think that's something that it struck me in the past, but it hit me quite hard now. At
No,
this
I
point
think
of time.
First of
she
all,
mentioned. Go on, Subbu.
go on, Jen.
I think the point of mentoring that she mentioned is actually a very good one. It's a good start and a stepping stone, and it also makes sense because the current corporate world or the organization is seen as created by men. So it's only fair that if we want women to play bigger a role and a bigger representation, they need to be taught the how the game is played or this one, and mentoring and is a good starting point and a step into it.
Jen, but my point is that I'm again getting another analogous argument. There was a very good argument which said that if you want to stop the rape, teach your son. Okay, right? So if you want to get more women, mentor the men first.
In terms of changing the mindset, yes.
Tell them that it is not such a because you got to change the mindset. I mean, for example, I have a very strong, I won't use the word objection, but a bit of a issue, even talking about the word mentoring. I mean, why mentoring? Why not be mentoring?
As long as it's not tormenting.
No, look, I'm saying if you want to change the way we think, we got to first change the way we think, which means we got to mentor the men first.
Yeah.
I mean, the second issue is networking. Now, again, I have a problem. Why is it that networking is so important? Why is it that a woman or a man, for that matter, do his job professionally, well, capably, achieving the objectives, and go home, and then still expect to grow further?
Because it's psychology one-on-one, that you do business and that you work with someone that you know better. I mean, you work with your friend. and hence networking relationship building is that much more important.
It can happen during office hours.
Hmm.
My point is, it can happen
can.
during office
Of course
hours.
it can.
Okay, so the limited point is that I think the constructs that we have, in terms of saying that, you know, this is the reality, this is the world, this is the business in superstructure. Now I will help you fit into it. Okay, my point is no. My point is no. Don't do that.
Expand it.
This, you know, this is the business. This is how business is run. You have a role to play. And as long as you're good enough to play the role, I don't give a damn about your gender. And why should I, as a man, okay, go and help somebody fit into my world? So my world is patriarchal. Thousands of years of patriarchy.
Right.
Okay. So I'm saying we have to redefine the way we think.
Right. But Subbu, I'll give you another analogy, and which incidentally happened this morning. I'm just coming back, and I'll tell you why I'm giving you that analogy. I think what she's mentioning, and what this one is, there's a foot in the door. There's a starting point. I'm just coming from a Sunday early morning run where my daughter goes for a run around the ground, and in that ground, there was some cricket league that was happening, and today some 4 teams were playing. Each team had 2 girls to play. Okay. So the 2 girls should definitely bat first, okay? And when the girl is batting, the guy should ball with left hand, okay? And the boundary is smaller, okay? And when out of the 10 overs, the girl should bowl at least 1 over. And when the girl is bowling the over, the guy should bat left-handed, okay? And I was talking to this with one of the captains, and I'm like, why are you doing this? I mean, why can't everybody play right-handed? He was like, dude, it took us a few months to get the girls included, 2 girls out of the 11 players included. Okay. And, we are slowly but surely changing the game. I mean, you come and talk to us 3 months down the line, then, we'll just be left. Matter. We'll get the baby steps. And I agree with you, mentoring both men and women is important, or whatever, educating, motivating, equalizing them in some or other way. But that, in my mind, is a good starting point. Okay. Women should be taught, they should first get a seat at the table before, trying to change the rules of the game. Okay. So get them to the seat of this one, explain them how the current status works. At the same time, explain the other 9 boys to respect the lady at the table. Okay, and there are going to be changes in the game, okay, the way the game is being played. Let's all understand that and then start evolving that. I think you're talking about a starting step here.
So Venki, any quick thoughts before I want to give Sohini the last word?
Yeah, so I think I think we should start with small steps. In one of my previous organizations, one of the observations we had was that, when you have 10 people around the table, it's the men who spoke more. And we had to, gradually mentor the women to also be a lot more expressive, because one of the things we found is that they were not very comfortable speaking up in a group, not very comfortable asking for what they really want. And I think in the long term, it is, essential to encourage greater diversity, because sometimes I feel that, women have an ability to not just think of the immediate present, but also the long term. Which is, and I think many of the problems of our society, whether it's climate change, etc., are because, we are extremely short term. The second point I want to make is that I think organizations have become too fast paced. I think, what is happening, and I'm seeing this repeatedly across multiple organizations, the time for mentorship has completely disappeared. The pressure on profits or whatever is, so high that people don't have time, managers don't have time, people are thrown into the jobs at the deep end without any support. I think organizations will also have to see systematically how they can mentor and encourage greater talent within the growth of talent within the enterprises, so that people can grow up the ranks, and that includes women as well as men.
Yeah, and I think
Venki, there was when you mentioned about the society, there's a very interesting comment that I heard in one of the workshops that I attended, which was that if all the leaders of the countries of the world were women instead of men, instead of all the fights that are going on, in case of difference, you will simply have 2 countries stop talking to each other.
stop talking to each other. I know what you're saying.
But to be fair, what I noticed with most of the women leaders that I've had a chat with, and is typically, and Sohini can shed much more light on that, is basically women find it a little difficult because at home they're expected to put in a lot of work, and then expected to deliver at home, expected to deliver at work. And that I think is a very unfair. It puts them, with a few exceptions. I mean, those who have really succeeded to get out of that trap and break through that trap are the outliers rather than so they're exceptions rather than the rule. So anyway, we'd love to your thoughts on that before we wind up this session.
Yeah, absolutely, Leslie. I've been listening to these conversations, and all of them make sense. The perspectives. Obviously, no changes happen overnight. So, this kind of changes like mentoring and all will also not happen overnight, and we can't see next year also. Maybe we'll talk similar things. We will talk about mentoring. To be honest, this has been happening since decades, but at least now people are talking about mentoring, and IT is though we say that under representation, but there are so many women, when especially before Women's Day, when you actually approach them, and they are so much willing to talk, and they're talking about mentorship. They're talking a lot of positive changes happening in the industry, something which is definitely positive. Yeah, there is a work-life balance, but then COVID has changed all that. Even men were cleaning utensils this time, and it has changed kind of the equation. So some things
Sometimes with a dishwasher, yes, but yes.
So we cannot be that rigid. Now everyone has stepped into the game. They're all helping each other out. I just hope next year, and it should not be like it's like Safer Internet Day and other days. We say that every day is Safer Internet Day. Every day is something
I agree.
the Privacy Day. So that way, every day should be Women's Day or any other day. We should. It's not like after 8th March we forget the entire gender diversity discourse and then talk other things, and then only from 6th to 7th and 8th March we talk these things. So I think it should be an ongoing issue, and whatever development I know Subbu hates the term post-pandemic era, etc., but yeah, now going forward we should see how things shape up, and how women take up these kind of challenges, and men, and they take it forward. That's
Great.
all. That's my view, nothing more.
Thank you. So friends, we've had a very exciting and insightful discussion. Basically, we started with the digital payment space, whether there is a need for another regulatory or rather another infrastructure body in the digital payment space when everything is working out so well for the industry. Then we segued into the telecom industry just to figure out, okay, why, what is happening in the telecom industry with since the auctions were just over, the spectrum auctions, and yes, most of the telecom companies are reeling under debt, but whether that's going to have an impact on phone bills, whether it's going to have an impact for the better on our quality of service or not, is something that we need to see. And of course, last but not the least, we discussed the most important topic according to me. What we feel is that women, we require more women in technology, and this whole assumption that women do not understand technology. In fact, actually, Sohini is also writing, I think she has written a book, right?
Yeah, I have written a book on the history of computing and technology, which which should be out sometime soon. And
yeah, so viewers,
share my thoughts on that later.
Please remember, this is a book written by a woman with a different kind of perspective. So it's you should read the book. So women do understand computing. Women do understand technology, and all the men on this panel will clearly understand that.
I just have a last question for Jayant and Venki. The way things are going, are we now going to see, government of Google taking on the Federal Republic of Reliance anytime soon?
Really? You want a one-line answer for a $1 trillion question? It's not even billion, it's $1 trillion question.
$1 trillion question.
It's a $1 trillion question. I agree with you. It's a $1 trillion question.
So let's leave it as a
So I'll give you
rhetorical
a diplomatic
question.
answer. I
Okay.
think, I think the governments around the world will have to start looking at building public digital infrastructure as a counterweight to the big tech. The best case is that the citizens benefit by having the government as a countervailing force. The worst case scenario is that both the big tech as well as the government oppress the citizen. So I think we are in a very tricky situation at this point in time. I don't have any sympathy for the big tech. I don't have any sympathy for governments.
Sorry, go on, Venki.
No, so I think it's a very, very tricky situation. We are at a very kind of a defining moment in history.
Let me give you an analogous answer, geopolitical analogous answer. It's the US-China relationship, right? I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. China needs US as a market, US needs China as a supplier. Okay, but at different levels they're fighting. It's going to be the same thing again.
Did you just call Google Chinese?
Oh, you're unnecessary neatly. Totally unacceptable. So, viewers, I know we could speak about this topic till the cows come home as usual. And thank you very much for your patience and being with us. Jayant, Venki, Sohini, thank you again for your time. Subbu, thank you for being lovely.
Thanks, Venki. Thanks, Jayant. Thanks, Sohini.
And thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Subbu. Pleasure always.
Thank you.
Please subscribe to the channel if you like it. And look forward to having all of you guys next weekend. Thank you very much.